watching Morning at NTV.
Good morning and welcome back to Morning at NTV. My name is Idris Matusegawa, and right about now we are getting into that segment where we talk about more issues that affect you at home, at the countrywide, and can make you live a better life. Now, like many other African countries, the major challenge for youth in Uganda is unemployment. Despite Uganda's positive economic growth rates at 7.5% in 2019, the unemployment rate is still high at 13.3%. When COVID-19 hit, the GDP growth rate shrunk to 3.1% in 2020, while Uganda's real GDP declined by 0.5%. This reduced the country's employment opportunities, which had yet to be realized in spite of Uganda's strides in economic growth pre-COVID-19. Now, I have a guest on Zoom who is going to be talking about that. Professor Anthony Mveyange, the Executive Director, Partnership for African Social Governance Research. Professor, good morning.
Good morning, Idris. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How is South Africa?
Well, actually, no, I'm based in Nairobi.
Oh, you are in Nairobi right now? Oh, perfect, perfect.
But all is good.
All right. So, Professor, tell us about Partnership for African Social Governance Research. What do you do? What's your mandate?
All right. So, Partnership for African Social Governance Research, PASCA for short, is an international non-partisan, not-for-profit organization. It was set up in 2011. It has three key mandates. One is to build uptake of research and generation of evidence. It also focuses on enhancing or building capacity of African scholars and researchers. And also, we also have what we call higher education interventions, where we have specific programs in master's and doctoral programs in public policy in Africa. So basically, PASCA as an institution was set up to address the gap in public policy and governance in Africa in terms of the evidence that is generated, in terms of the capacity that is needed, at the same time building the relevant skills that are needed to be able to spearhead effort in sort of bringing out issues in public policy space and governance in Africa.
COVID-19 has had a great impact not only on the youth, but the population worldwide. What kind of research are you doing on that?
Good question. So the research we are doing, so traditionally, the research that has been done has basically been top-down. Now with COVID-19, we realized that things were quite different. And if there's one thing that came to us that was striking was the fact that COVID-19 was reversing the gains that were achieved in the last 2 decades on poverty and inequality in Africa. So with the onset of COVID-19, there was a need to think differently, there was a need to act differently, and to look at the bottom-up approach. So in this research that we are conducting in Uganda, the goal is to try to understand, not from the top down, is to understand from the youth, what is it that African youth want? And this is a project which we are working, it's supported by MasterCard Foundation. We are doing it in several countries in Africa, about 7 countries, in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, Senegal, Uganda, and Rwanda. And the idea again is to try to hear what are the youth voices? How do youth want to be empowered? How have they survived COVID-19? What techniques, what approaches, what adaptability mechanisms they have used to survive and remain resilient during and even post-COVID-19. I think these are very fundamental issues, especially now when we think about youth unemployment bulge, the demographic dividend that the continent enjoys, and the struggle, the frictions that we see government in Africa with the rising unemployment rates, struggling to think about how do they absorb the labor market of these young Africans who are coming out from school, from universities every day. Now, this research is meant to sort of profile and understand these African youth, especially in this case for Uganda. What is it that they want? How do we build their capacity? How do we empower them? It's not always about what the government wants. One area that has not been fully explored is what about what youth want? and what sectoral interventions that government, private sector donors can do to intervene and respond to exactly what youth want. So this is the core of this research, trying to hear the youth voices in Uganda. How can we intervene? How can private sector intervene? And we believe that with the evidence generated from this research, the government in Uganda, the practitioners, the stakeholders in Uganda will be able to tell how best to intervene to support Ugandan youth.
Professor, how long is the research going to take, and what kind of assumptions are you going in with it?
Well, we are at the inception stage, and maybe just to be clear, we are at this inception stage. So first we deploy our PASCA has what we call utafiti sera approach. Utafiti sera is a Swahili word standing for research and policy. And the idea here is that our way of doing research, we want to connect both research and policymakers, because traditionally there's always a disconnect between research and policymakers because of the different interests that researchers have vis-a-vis policymakers have. Now, our goal is to bring together in the room the stakeholders, which is what is going to happen in Uganda. We bring all the stakeholders in the room with the idea of discussing the pressing issues in Uganda on youth, and how best we engage the stakeholders, mapping out the key stakeholders in this convening, and how do we engage them. Now, the assumptions will come from the people. The issues will come from the stakeholders. So it's more of a demand-driven approach. And we usually tend to do this in our research because we don't want to use partners passively. We want to engage. We want the issues to come from the partners. We use our skills and our team to design the appropriate research approaches and methodologies that can respond to the issues at hand. And with that, we are able to actually address demand-driven issues that speak to the core of the youth challenges in Uganda. So the assumptions have not been developed fully. These will be explored in the convening, during the discussions with the partners, during the discussions with the stakeholders in Uganda. And out of that, we will be able to chart out a clear roadmap of where this research is going to take, or rather is going to go.
Well, if there are some youth that are interested in taking part of the research, how can they be inducted into your research?
I lost you. Sorry, come again.
How, if there are youth that are interested in being part of the research, how can they contact you?
Yes. We do have youth. Basically, this convening is for the youth. Let me be very clear. The convening brings together youth. And when we say stakeholders, we mean, of course, we're going to have partners who are interested in the youth space. We have donors, we have government in the youth space. The research leaders are young people. The people who are engaged in this conversation are young people. We want to hear from the young people. We want to hear the voices of the youth. So basically, this convening and the research that's going to be done, and even the final output of this project, will be about African youth, Ugandan youth to be more precise. The youth will be directly involved, will be mapped out based on their socioeconomic status, will be mapped out based on their whether geographical location, rural or urban. Nationally representative sample will be drawn to sort of get a sense of what Ugandan youth are saying. So the key speakers, the key voices that will be captured in this research is 100% Ugandan youth.
Well, Professor, what are some of the expectations post-research? How are you going to make sure that the findings that you get from the research actually acted on?
Very good question. So the idea here, as I said, our utafiti sera approach brings together the stakeholders to identify the issues, to identify the challenges. Once we have these identified fully, we then design the research together. So there's co-ownership, there's co-creation of whatever we are going to do going forward in Uganda. Our hope is that once we have co-created, we create what we call a community of practice. In our in-house language, we call houses. And these houses in Uganda, in this case, on youth engagement, it will actually bring together these stakeholders to own the findings and the evidence that we are going to generate. Our hope is that the uptake post the research will be easy, because in the design, remember, we're going to have government, we're going to have other stakeholders, donors, private sector, civil societies, media will also be involved. The youth will be at the center of all this. Our hope is that post the research, the evidence that is going to be generated will be taken up for policy implementation immediately. We will be able to influence decision-making in the Ugandan youth space. both at the local level, regional level, and of course within the main government, to think about how best to bring out youth voices and support Ugandan youth. But more broadly, as PASGA, as an institution that is championing this research jointly with the support from MasterCard Foundation, we want to see a cross-pollination of ideas. What Ugandan youth are saying, what Kenyan youth are saying, what about Ghanaian youth, Nigerian, Senegalese. So the idea is then to have a cohesive, collective voice of African youth from the different, with the goal of understanding the nuances across the different countries, the commonalities across the 7 countries that this project is actually being run. And the idea is then, can we then bring out broader African youth voices in terms of how best can be supported in the work of COVID-19 and post-COVID-19?
All right, Professor Mveyange Anthony, thank you so much for talking to us, and good luck with the research, and I hope it helps us improve on the opportunities that the youth can access in the country. Thank you very much for hosting me. All right, right about now we are going to switch to the